Hey, this is Cory Wong. I'm here with Sweetwater to talk about 3 common mistakes that rhythm guitar players make. Now, before we get started, I want to acknowledge a couple things. First off, we as guitar players need to be okay with the fact that sometimes we make mistakes. We're not always perfect, so get over it. It's okay. We have to acknowledge those things. Number 2 is that I normally like to focus on the positive parts of my playing and the positive parts of things that people are doing in music, because music is such an art and it's subjective. But there are certain things that can be objective that we can look at and acknowledge, okay, these are some things that we could potentially look at as issues on why things might not be working out, or why when something that you're playing maybe doesn't sit as hot in the mix when you listen back, or it just feels like something kind of clashes. Number 1, you probably have too many notes in your voicings. Now this of course depends on the instrumentation of your band, but it's a common thing that I see. And I think the reason is because many of us were taught chord voicings like this: 6th string rooted bar chords, 5th string rooted bar chords, where we have these large voicings, 5 or 6 notes, where you think about it on the piano, it would just be like these big clunky voicings. And on the guitar, we tend to want to play these big thick voicings because they sound awesome, right? The issue with that is that in the context of a band, there's typically a bass player playing the low note, and oftentimes there's another comping or melodic instrument, keyboard, piano, whatever. In my band, I have a horn section and actually sometimes 2 keyboard players and a singer, that sort of thing. There's a lot of harmonic information, bass note information, and melodic information happening. So what I need to take into consideration is how many notes am I playing, and is it too much information? For example, I could work on playing a G7 chord, just comping a G7 chord like this. And that sounds fine on its own. But in the context of a band, it might actually muddy up the mix a little bit. And what can end up happening is either the front of house engineer or the mixing engineer in a studio might end up just turning down the guitar because it feels like, I don't know, it's cluttered. Maybe the guitar's too loud. And then the volume gets down, and then all of a sudden you just don't hear your guitar. Now, one of the things that can actually solve that problem for them occasionally is just to make a thinner voicing, just play less notes. So that same exact sort of thing, if I just whittled it down to these 3 notes, I could do this. I could just do 2 notes like this. Now the rhythmic value is the exact same. The harmonic information, I'm just giving less of it because I'm creating room for what would potentially be a keyboard, a horn section, a bass player is playing the root note, so I don't really have to play that low. And what it ends up doing is it creates a lot more space in an arrangement. The second mistake that I see a lot of rhythm guitar players make is their consistency of right hand and their control over their right hand dynamics. Now, of course, those are kind of 2 different things, but it's one overarching concept that not a lot of people practice. And I only know this because I went to music college and I saw what most of my peers were practicing, and I even saw what the classes were teaching and what a lot of the books out there are teaching. There's not as much focus on this sort of thing. So the thing that I want to suggest for you and recommend is, if you're trying to get a more precise and a more accurate rhythm guitar approach, work on the consistency of right hand and controlling your accents. So I'm going to just show you a couple things here. So what I like to do is practice with a metronome. I don't have one with me right now, but I just practice steady thing, or even just a drum set metronome you can find online. You can search in your browser for a drum machine, or go in Logic or Pro Tools or whatever you use, and just play along in time. Just start like this. And then do 16th notes. And you'll notice that my left hand is just muting the strings. Just focus on your right hand. Try to get the consistency happening. And then once you do that, try to add in different accents and accent patterns. I'll start with the 8th note one, all downstrokes just for now. And what you want to do is focus on your quieter notes and your louder notes not changing where the time gets placed. Focus on keeping the same time, but a different velocity and a different attack on each of those. You can do the same thing with 16th notes. Where you're kind of placing accents in different places. What it does is it gives you more control, so you can do things like so that way when I'm playing through those sort of riffs, it's kind of part of my style and part of the way that I play. That right hand consistency is so important. I don't want to think about how is this accent going to come. I just want it to be second nature. And the more that I practice those sort of things, the more that it just can come out and flow in my playing. The third mistake that I hear a lot of rhythm guitar players make is all about awareness. It has nothing to do with even what you're playing. Well, that's kind of a lie. It has a lot to do with what you're playing, but it's not anything to do with your hands. It's all about what you're focusing on in your mind. A lot of guitar players that I see are really just focused on what it is that they're playing, and they're not paying attention to what the people around them are playing in the context of a band, which to me is absolutely absurd, because if you think about all the best bands in history, you think about orchestras, how an orchestra will arrange parts, the brass section with the woodwind section with the string section. Even the string section, they're all arranged to make room for each other. Best rock and roll bands have that sort of thing. The best funk bands, horn bands, all that sort of stuff. So if you think about what you're playing and only focus on that, you're not going to realize whether what you're playing gets in the way of the melody, is a counter to the melody that doesn't quite line up on this one particular eighth note, so it kind of muddies up the entire thing. The more that you pay attention to what else is happening in the band, the more that you're going to understand what your role is in the song, or what somebody else's role is. In my band as Cory Wong, I'm the band leader, so I kind of get to do whatever I want on the guitar, which is pretty fun. I understand that's a little bit of an anomaly, but what I do is I have my guitar parts, and then I'm paying attention to what everybody else is doing. And sometimes I think, oh, actually, because of what this person is doing, I might want to change a little bit of what I'm doing. Or what it can be is, I have this guitar part, and I'm listening to what everybody else is playing, and I'm recognizing that somebody else's rhythm, this 1/16th note, kind of makes a hiccup compared to what my guitar part is. So then I can ask them to change their part. Sometimes I change my part, sometimes the other one. It really just depends on what feels like the best move for that particular song or that particular section or arrangement of the song. So mental awareness and paying attention to your surroundings, obviously that's a good life lesson as well, but it's super important in playing the guitar and rhythm guitar, because as a rhythm guitarist, what I'm thinking about is, how is my right hand feel locking with the drummer's feel? How are the heavy chords, the heavy downbeats that I'm playing lining up with the bass player? How is the melodic parts of what I'm playing lining up with the other melodic instruments, like the vocal or some other lead instrument? And also, how much harmonic information am I giving related to anybody else who's giving that? Keyboard players, horn players, bass players, whatever, anybody else in the band, like we talked about in our voicings. That awareness is going to help you understand your role as a guitar player, and it's going to help you understand how to craft better parts. Parts that work better within the song, parts ultimately that will end up sitting hotter in the mix and just being something that stands out a little bit more on its own. Thanks for hanging with me. This is Cory Wong at Sweetwater. If you want to dive deeper into any of these concepts, I actually have a guitar course. You can go to corywongguitarcourse.com. There's a lot more of a deep dive that you can do in these things, but I promise if you implement these 3 things into your playing, your rhythm guitar playing will be much better.